The maintenance bay of the UES Defiance hummed with the usual sounds of military precision. Marines cleaned their weapons with practiced efficiency, while discussing the latest alien incursion reports from the outer colonies. Commander Jake Morrison walked through the bay, his SEAL team preparing for another high-risk mission against the Zephyrian Empire. That's when he noticed her. A young woman sat alone in the corner, methodically disassembling a Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle with movements so fluid they seemed almost dance-like. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the standard-issue coveralls of a civilian contractor. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything more than another maintenance worker. But something about the way she handled that rifle made Morrison pause. He'd seen thousands of soldiers clean weapons over his 15-year career. This was different. Her fingers moved across the components with an intimacy that spoke of years of experience, not training. She inspected each part with the kind of attention usually reserved for family heirlooms, not military hardware. "Excuse me," Morrison approached, his curiosity getting the better of him. "I haven't seen you around before." She looked up with startling green eyes that seemed to assess him in a single glance. "Sarah Chen, I'm new to the maintenance crew." Her voice was soft but steady, with just a hint of an accent he couldn't place. "That's a hell of a rifle you're working on," Morrison said, gesturing to the Barrett. "Most maintenance techs don't get assigned to the heavy weapons." Sarah's hands never stopped moving as she cleaned the barrel with precision that bordered on artistry. "Chief Martinez asked me to look at it. The previous operator reported some accuracy issues at extreme range." Morrison frowned. That rifle belonged to Sergeant Torres, one of his best snipers. Torres had mentioned some concerns about grouping at distances beyond 1,500 meters, but those were minute details that only a master marksman would notice. "What did you find?" he asked. Sarah held up a tiny component no bigger than her fingernail. Microscopic scoring on the firing pin, probably caused by sand infiltration during the Kepler 442b operation. "It's creating inconsistent primer strikes, which explains the accuracy drift." Morrison's eyebrows shot up. The Kepler 442b mission was classified. Only his team and a handful of command staff knew about the environmental challenges they'd faced on that desert planet. How could a maintenance worker know such specific details? "That's very observant," he said carefully. Sarah reassembled the rifle with motions so smooth they seemed choreographed. When she finished, she performed a function check that would have impressed his weapons sergeants. "I notice things," she said simply. Before Morrison could ask more questions, his comm unit chimed with an urgent message. Admiral Harrison wanted to see him immediately about the new mission parameters. As he turned to leave, he caught Sarah watching him with those penetrating green eyes. "Commander," she called softly, "be careful out there. The Zephyrians have upgraded their armor since Proxima Centauri." Morrison froze. The Proxima Centauri engagement was so classified it wasn't even in the official records. Only the teams who fought there knew about the enemy's tactical adaptations. He spun around, but Sarah had already returned to her work, her attention focused on another weapon as if nothing had happened. In Admiral Harrison's briefing room, Morrison found himself distracted. The mission details washed over him as he thought about the mysterious maintenance worker. Something wasn't adding up. Her knowledge was too specific, her skills too refined for someone who was supposedly just cleaning weapons. "Morrison, are you listening?" Admiral Harrison's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I said we're facing a new Zephyrian battle group near the Vega system. Intelligence suggests they're testing new energy weapons. Your team will infiltrate their command ship and gather tactical data." Morrison nodded, but his mind was still on Sarah Chen. After the briefing, he made his way to the ship's personnel database. According to her file, Sarah had joined the maintenance crew just 3 days ago. Her background was surprisingly thin for someone working on a military vessel. Previous employment at various civilian contractors, basic security clearance, no red flags. But something nagged at him. The way she'd handled that Barrett, the classified knowledge, the casual mention of enemy tactical upgrades. It all pointed to someone with far more experience than a simple maintenance worker. That evening, Morrison found himself back in the maintenance bay. Most of the crew had finished their shifts, but Sarah was still there, now working on a damaged pulse rifle that had been returned from the front lines. The weapon's focusing array was completely destroyed, yet she was rebuilding it from scratch using spare parts. "Working late?" Morrison asked. Sarah didn't look up from her work. These weapons save lives. I don't like leaving broken tools. Morrison watched her hands as she manipulated the delicate focusing crystals. It was precision work that typically required specialized training and years of experience. Where did you learn to do that? Here and there, Sarah replied vaguely. You pick things up. Sarah, Morrison said, using his command voice. What aren't you telling me? For the first time since he'd met her, Sarah's hands stopped moving. She set down her tools and finally looked at him directly. In her eyes, Morrison saw something he recognized, the look of someone who had seen combat, who had made life-and-death decisions under fire. Some questions are better left unasked, Commander, she said quietly. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in her tone, a weight that spoke of secrets buried deep. As he stood there studying her face in the harsh lighting of the maintenance bay, he realized that Sarah Chen was far more than she appeared to be. The question was, what was she hiding, and why was she here? Outside the viewports, the stars wheeled silently as the UES Defiance continued its journey toward whatever awaited them in the Vega system. But Morrison's attention was entirely focused on the enigmatic woman who had just revealed that she was keeping secrets that could change everything. Morrison couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah's hands moving across that rifle with impossible precision. He'd run background checks on countless personnel over the years, and something about her file felt manufactured. Too clean, too simple for someone with her obvious skills. At 300 hours, he made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed if anyone found out. He accessed the ship's security footage from the past 3 days, focusing on Sarah's movements since she'd come aboard. What he found made his blood run cold. The first anomaly was subtle. In the footage from her first day, Sarah had walked directly to sections of the ship that weren't on any standard orientation tour. She moved through the corridors like someone who had been there before, never hesitating at intersections, never checking door numbers. It was the kind of navigation that came from muscle memory. The second discovery was more disturbing. During the night shift on her second day, Sarah had accessed restricted areas that her clearance level shouldn't have allowed. Yet the security system showed no alarms, no forced entries. She had simply walked through doors that should have been locked to her. Morrison enhanced the footage, studying her face as she moved through these secured zones. There was no nervousness, no looking over her shoulder. She moved with the confidence of someone who belonged there. The third piece of evidence made Morrison's hands shake as he typed. Sarah had spent 47 minutes in the ship's armory, supposedly conducting routine maintenance. But the inventory logs showed discrepancies. Small amounts of specialized ammunition had gone missing, the kind used by deep reconnaissance teams for equipment that officially didn't exist. Morrison sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Either Sarah Chen was the most skilled infiltrator he'd ever encountered, or she was something else entirely. Something that his security clearance might not be high enough to know about. The next morning, Morrison found himself in the maintenance bay again, this time with a purpose. Sarah was there as always, working on weapons with that same methodical precision. Today she was calibrating the sights on a collection of sniper rifles that had been returned from various missions. "Good morning, Commander," she said without looking up. "How did you sleep?" The question seemed innocent enough, but something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Morrison decided to take a direct approach. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," he said, "about questions being better left unasked." Sarah's hands paused for just a fraction of a second before continuing their work. "And I think I'm going to ask them anyway." This time Sarah did stop. She set down the rifle she was holding and turned to face him fully. For a moment, Morrison felt like he was being evaluated by a predator, deciding whether he was prey or just an inconvenience. "Careful, Commander," she said softly. "Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again." Morrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. 3 days ago, someone walked onto my ship with credentials that check out but skills that don't match. Someone who knows classified mission details and handles weapons like they've been doing it their whole life. Someone who can access restricted areas without triggering a single alarm. Sarah's expression didn't change, but Morrison caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Approval, resignation? He couldn't tell. "What do you want from me, Commander?" "The truth." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving to the viewports where the stars streamed past. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Morrison's chest tighten. The truth is dangerous, Commander, especially out here where the enemy has more resources and better intelligence than Command wants to admit. Try me. Sarah picked up one of the sniper rifles and began field stripping it with movements so fast they were almost a blur. Tell me about your mission to the Vega system. What does Command expect you to find? Morrison hesitated. Mission details were classified, but something about Sarah's question suggested she already knew more than she should. Intelligence gathering. We're supposed to infiltrate a Zephyrian command ship and download their tactical database. And what makes Command think the Zephyrians will have their real tactical data on a ship that's operating in contested space? The question hit Morrison like a physical blow. It was the same concern that had been nagging at him since the briefing, but one he hadn't voiced even to his own team. Strategic commanders didn't keep vital intelligence on ships that might be captured or destroyed. Think it's a trap, he said. Sarah's hands never stopped moving as she cleaned each component with mechanical precision. I think the Zephyrians have been feeding false intelligence to human operatives for months. I think they know exactly which ships have SEAL teams aboard, and I think your mission is designed to fail. Morrison felt ice forming in his stomach.
How could you possibly know that?
Because, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, I've seen their real tactical capabilities, and what they're planning for humanity is worse than anything Command has imagined. Before Morrison could respond, the ship's alert klaxons began blaring. Red lights flashed as the general quarters alarm echoed through the corridors. Morrison's comm unit crackled to life with urgent orders. All hands to battle stations. Zephyrian vessels detected on long-range sensors. EDA to contact, 47 minutes. Morrison looked at Sarah, who had calmly set down the rifle she was cleaning and was now reaching for something in her toolkit. When her hand emerged, it wasn't holding a maintenance tool. It was holding a military-grade comm device that Morrison had never seen before, one that bore markings he didn't recognize. Commander, Sarah said, her entire demeanor shifting as she activated the device. I think it's time you learned who I really am. The comm device hummed to life, and Morrison heard a voice that made his blood freeze. It was Admiral Harrison, but not the Admiral Harrison who had briefed him yesterday. This voice carried an authority and knowledge that suggested there were layers to the command structure that Morrison had never suspected. Agent Chen, the voice said. Status report. Sarah's response was crisp and professional, but Morrison barely heard it. His mind was reeling as he realized that the woman he'd been investigating was investigating him right back. And if she was Agent Chen, not Sarah the maintenance worker, then everything he thought he knew about this mission was about to change. The Zephyrian ships were approaching, and Morrison was about to discover that the real war was far more complex than anyone had told him. The maintenance bay transformed before Morrison's eyes. Sarah moved with fluid efficiency, pulling hidden panels from the walls that Morrison had never noticed. Behind them were weapons and equipment that definitely weren't standard issue. Military-grade plasma rifles, reconnaissance gear that looked decades ahead of anything he'd seen, and communication devices that hummed with encrypted data streams. Agent Chen reporting. Sarah spoke into her comm device. Cover maintained. Target has been assessed and cleared for intelligence upgrade. Morrison felt like the deck had shifted beneath his feet. Target, what the hell is going on here? Sarah finished her transmission and turned to face him. The shy maintenance worker was completely gone, replaced by someone who radiated the kind of controlled lethality that Morrison associated with his most elite operators. Commander Morrison, I'm Agent Sarah Chen, Human Intelligence Division, Department of Interstellar Security. For the past 6 months, I've been tracking a Zephyrian infiltration network that reaches into the highest levels of Fleet Command. Morrison's mind raced. Department of Interstellar Security. I've never heard of that organization. Most people haven't. We operate in the spaces between official military structure and civilian oversight. Our job is to handle threats that are too dangerous or too politically sensitive for standard military response. The ship shuddered slightly as the engines changed configuration for combat operations. Through the viewports, Morrison could see the running lights of other ships in their battle group adjusting formation. The Zephyrians approaching us aren't here by coincidence, Sarah continued, securing her equipment with practiced movements. They've been tracking this ship specifically because of your SEAL team. Someone in Fleet Command has been feeding them detailed information about your operations. Morrison felt anger building in his chest. That's a serious accusation, Agent Chen. It's a serious situation, Commander. In the past 3 months, 7 SEAL teams have been ambushed during what should have been routine reconnaissance missions. The enemy has had detailed knowledge of human tactics, equipment capabilities, and even personal information about team members. Sarah pulled out a datapad and handed it to Morrison. The screen showed tactical analyses of recent engagements, casualty reports, and intercepted communications. The evidence was damning. Someone with access to the highest levels of military intelligence was systematically betraying human forces to the enemy. Why wasn't my team informed about this? Morrison demanded. Because we didn't know who we could trust. The leak could be anyone from Admiral Harrison to your own team members. My job was to get close to your unit, assess the security risk, and determine whether you could be trusted with the real mission parameters. Morrison stared at the datapad, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. The mission to the Vega system. It's not really about gathering intelligence, is it? Sarah shook her head. It's bait. We're using your team to draw out the traitor. The Zephyrians think they're going to capture or kill another SEAL team. Instead, they're going to find themselves facing something they've never encountered before. Before Morrison could ask what she meant, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Commander Morrison to the bridge immediately. Admiral Harrison requests your presence for tactical briefing. Morrison looked at Sarah, uncertainty written across his face. If Admiral Harrison is potentially compromised, walking into that briefing could be a death sentence. Not necessarily, Sarah said, reaching into one of her hidden compartments and pulling out what looked like a standard military comm earpiece. This will allow me to monitor everything that's said in that briefing. More importantly, it has countermeasures against Zephyrian mental influence technology. Morrison accepted the earpiece, his mind still struggling to process the implications. Mental influence technology. The Zephyrians have been using subtle psychic manipulation to extract information from human personnel. It's how they've been staying one step ahead of our tactical planning. The device I just gave you will protect your thoughts and allow you to feed false information to any compromised individuals. As Morrison fitted the earpiece, he felt a subtle change in his perception. Colors seemed slightly sharper, and he found himself more aware of the emotional undertones in Sarah's voice. It was as if a veil had been lifted from his mind. How long have you known about this technology? He asked. Human intelligence has been tracking Zephyrian psychic capabilities for 2 years. We've developed countermeasures, but the information has been kept from regular military units to prevent panic and to maintain operational security. Morrison headed toward the door, then paused. Agent Chen, when this is over, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about information sharing and trust. Sarah smiled for the first time since revealing her identity. I'm looking forward to it, Commander. As Morrison made his way to the bridge, his mind was spinning with new possibilities. If the Zephyrians had been using psychic manipulation, how many military decisions had been influenced by enemy action? How many soldiers had died because of compromised intelligence? The bridge was a hub of controlled activity when Morrison arrived. Admiral Harrison stood before the main tactical display, studying the approaching enemy formation. Something about the Admiral's posture seemed different to Morrison, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed. Commander Morrison, Admiral Harrison said without turning around. I trust you've prepared your team for immediate deployment? Yes, sir. What are our mission parameters? Harrison finally turned and Morrison felt the earpiece Sarah had given him pulse with subtle warmth. The Admiral's eyes seemed slightly unfocused, and when he spoke, his voice carried an odd rhythm that Morrison had never noticed before. The Zephyrian command ship is maintaining position at the edge of the system. Intelligence suggests they're waiting for reinforcements before engaging our battle group. This gives us a window of opportunity to infiltrate their vessel and retrieve their tactical database. Morrison nodded, but through the earpiece, he could hear Sarah's voice providing a running commentary on the Admiral's statements. Lie. The Zephyrian ship is already at full combat readiness. Partial truth. They are waiting, but not for reinforcements. Complete fabrication. There is no tactical database on that ship. The briefing continued for 20 minutes with Admiral Harrison providing detailed mission parameters that sounded perfectly reasonable. But Sarah's analysis revealed that nearly every piece of information was either false or dangerously incomplete. As Morrison prepared to leave the bridge, Admiral Harrison placed a hand on his shoulder. The contact sent a chill through Morrison's body, and the earpiece began emitting a high-pitched whine that only he could hear. "Commander," the Admiral said, his voice carrying strange harmonics. "Remember that the success of this mission depends on following orders exactly as given. Deviation from the mission parameters could result in catastrophic failure." Morrison felt pressure building in his mind, as if someone was trying to force thoughts into his head. The earpiece's whine grew louder, and suddenly the pressure disappeared. "Understood, sir," Morrison replied, keeping his voice steady. As he left the bridge, Morrison realized that the war against the Zephyrians was far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The enemy wasn't just fighting with ships and weapons, they were fighting with minds and souls. And somehow a maintenance worker named Sarah Chen held the key to humanity's survival. Morrison returned to the maintenance bay to find it completely transformed. The space had been reconfigured into what could only be described as a tactical command center. Banks of monitors displayed real-time intelligence feeds, encrypted communication channels, and tactical analyses that were far beyond anything available to regular military units. Sarah stood at the center of it all, no longer pretending to be anything other than what she was: a highly trained intelligence operative coordinating a complex operation. She wore tactical gear that seemed to blend human engineering with technology Morrison didn't recognize. "How did you do all this without anyone noticing?" Morrison asked, gesturing at the sophisticated equipment. "Selective perception fields," Sarah replied, pointing to small devices mounted around the room. "Anyone not wearing a countermeasure device like yours would see an ordinary maintenance bay. The Zephyrians aren't the only ones with advanced technology." Morrison studied the intelligence feeds, his enhanced perception allowing him to process information faster than ever before. "What did you learn from the briefing?" Sarah pulled up a three-dimensional tactical display showing the Zephyrian ships. "Admiral Harrison is definitely compromised, but not in the way we initially suspected. He's not a traitor in the traditional sense, he's being controlled through a Zephyrian neural implant." "Neural implant? How is that possible?" "The Zephyrians have been using micro-scale infiltration devices for months. Tiny machines that attach to the brainstem and influence decision-making processes. The victim isn't aware they're being controlled. They believe they're making their own choices." Morrison felt sick.
How many other officers could be compromised?
"Unknown. That's why we need to resolve this situation carefully. If we move too aggressively, the Zephyrians might activate sleeper agents throughout the fleet." Sarah manipulated the tactical display, highlighting specific ships in the enemy formation. "Here's what's really happening. The Zephyrian command ship isn't waiting for reinforcements. It's serving as a mobile interrogation facility. They're planning to capture your team alive and extract everything they know about human military capabilities. And then they'll use that information to launch a coordinated assault on Earth's outer defense stations. Our intelligence suggests they've been preparing for this operation for over a year." Morrison studied the enemy ship configurations. "So what's our real mission?" Sarah's expression grew grim. "We're going to turn their trap against them. Your team is going to board that command ship as planned, but instead of trying to steal their data, you're going to plant a virus in their neural network." She handed Morrison a device no larger than a coin. "This contains a human-designed cognitive virus that will sever the psychic connections between the Zephyrians and their controlled assets. When activated, it will free Admiral Harrison and any other compromised personnel." Morrison examined the device. "What about the risks? If this goes wrong, my team could be captured or killed." "That's where my real mission comes in," Sarah said. "I'm not actually assigned to this ship as an intelligence gatherer. I'm here as your backup. While your team creates a distraction on the command ship, I'll be infiltrating their escort vessels to gather intelligence on their broader operational plans." Before Morrison could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The tactical displays flickered as new information streamed in. The Zephyrian formation was moving, and their approach vector had changed dramatically. "They're not waiting anymore," Sarah said, her fingers flying across her control panels. "Something has changed their timeline." Morrison watched the enemy ships accelerate toward their position. What could have triggered this? Sarah's face went pale as she processed incoming intelligence feeds. "Commander, they know about me. Somehow they've discovered that human intelligence has an operative on this ship." The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. If they know about you, then they know about the real mission. Worse than that, Sarah said, pulling up a communication intercept. They've just transmitted a signal to sleeper cells throughout the human fleet. Whatever neural implants they've placed are about to be activated simultaneously. Morrison felt the deck shudder as the ship's weapon systems came online. Through the viewports, he could see the other vessels in their battle group adjusting their formations. But something looked wrong. The movement seemed too coordinated, too precise. Sarah, are you telling me that our own ships might turn against us? It's possible. The Zephyrians have been planning this for months. They may have compromised key personnel on multiple vessels. Morrison activated his comm unit to contact his team, but Sarah grabbed his wrist. Don't use standard communications. The Zephyrians will be monitoring all channels now. She handed him a secure communication device. This will reach your team without being intercepted. But Commander, you need to know something else. The mission parameters have to change. Morrison looked at her expectantly. The cognitive virus I gave you won't just affect the Zephyrians. It will also reveal the true extent of their infiltration of human forces. Some of your own team members might be compromised without knowing it. Morrison felt the weight of impossible choices settling on his shoulders. Are you saying I can't trust my own people? I'm saying you need to be prepared for any possibility. The Zephyrians are masters of psychological warfare. They might have implanted false memories, altered personality patterns, or created completely artificial loyalties. Through the secure comm device, Morrison could hear his team checking in from their positions throughout the ship. Their voices sounded normal, professional, exactly as they should, but now every word carried the potential for deception. Agent Chen, Morrison said, I need to know right now. Is there anyone on this ship I can trust completely? Sarah met his gaze steadily. You can trust me, Commander. And you can trust yourself because the device you're wearing would have detected any Zephyrian influence. Beyond that, she gestured at the tactical displays showing the approaching enemy formation. We're about to find out. The ship shuddered again as the Zephyrian vessels entered weapons range. Morrison realized that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of his team, but potentially the survival of human civilization, and somehow, it all depended on a woman who had been pretending to clean rifles while planning one of the most complex military operations in human history. Sarah, Morrison said, what happens if we fail? Her answer chilled him to the bone. Then humanity learns what it means to be enslaved by a species that can control minds as easily as we control computers. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin, and Morrison wasn't sure who he could trust to fight it. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when Morrison's secure comm device crackled with an unexpected transmission. It was Sergeant Torres, his sniper, but the voice carried an odd mechanical quality that made Morrison's enhanced earpiece pulse with warning signals. Commander, I've been ordered by Admiral Harrison to secure the armory. There's been a security breach in the maintenance section. Morrison looked at Sarah, who was rapidly analyzing the transmission through her equipment. Her face had gone white. That's not Torres, she whispered. The vocal patterns are wrong. Someone or something is using his communication device. Morrison activated his comm. Torres, what's your current position? Deck 7, Section C, Commander. You need to report to Admiral Harrison immediately. There are concerns about potential sabotage. Sarah shook her head vigorously. Don't go, Jake. That transmission is coming from the bridge, not Deck 7. And the neural pattern suggests the person speaking is under direct psychic control. Morrison felt ice forming in his stomach. Torres was one of his most trusted operators, a man who had saved his life on 3 separate occasions. If the Zephyrians could control him, then no one was safe. The ship suddenly shuddered violently and the lights flickered. Through the viewports, Morrison could see that 2 ships from their own battle group had changed course and were now targeting the UES Defiance with their weapons. They've activated their sleeper network, Sarah said, her fingers flying across her control panels. At least 40% of the fleet is now under direct Zephyrian control. Morrison watched in horror as human ships began firing on each other. The careful formation that had taken hours to establish dissolved into chaos as vessels turned against their former allies. The Zephyrian ships hung back, letting humanity destroy itself. How do we stop this? Morrison demanded. Sarah pulled up a schematic of the ship's internal structure. The cognitive virus needs to be deployed from the Zephyrian command ship's central processing core. But with our own fleet compromised, getting there has become exponentially more dangerous. Morrison studied the tactical situation. Their ship was now taking fire from multiple directions, and the bridge was undoubtedly planning to either surrender or destroy them, to prevent any interference with the Zephyrian plan. What about deploying the virus from here? Morrison asked. Impossible. The Zephyrian neural network is shielded against remote intrusion. It has to be a direct physical connection to their primary systems. Morrison made a decision that went against every instinct he'd developed in 15 years of military service. Then we're going to steal a ship. Sarah stared at him. What do you mean? The maintenance bay has access to the fighter launch tubes. If we can get to one of the interceptors, we can reach the Zephyrian command ship directly. Commander, that's suicide. Their escort ships will destroy us before we get within a kilometer of the target. Morrison was already moving toward Sarah's hidden equipment lockers. Not if we use their own tactics against them. You said the Zephyrians use selective perception fields. Can we adapt that technology to make ourselves invisible to their sensors? Sarah's eyes widened as she understood his plan. It's theoretically possible, but I've never tested the field generators on a moving spacecraft. The power requirements alone could overload an interceptor's systems. Better than waiting here to be captured or killed. Sarah began pulling specialized equipment from her hidden stores. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast. I'm detecting increased Zephyrian activity throughout the ship. They're sending boarding parties to secure key personnel. Morrison activated his secure comm one more time, trying to reach any team members who might still be uncompromised. This is Morrison. Code Black authorization. All units report to emergency stations. The responses came back immediately, but Sarah's analysis equipment painted a terrifying picture. Of his 8-person team, only 3 responses showed normal neural patterns. The others had the same mechanical quality that had marked Tora's transmission. Commander, came a voice Morrison recognized as his demolitions expert, Corporal Martinez. Where are you? Admiral Harrison has ordered all senior personnel to report to the bridge immediately. Morrison didn't respond. If Martinez was compromised, then the Zephyrians knew exactly where his team was positioned throughout the ship. Sarah had finished configuring her equipment and was now loading it onto a mobile cart. Jake, there's something else you need to know. The cognitive virus won't just free the human personnel. It will also give us access to the Zephyrian tactical database. We'll learn everything about their invasion plans, their technology, and their weaknesses. And if it doesn't work, then the Zephyrians will have our memories, our tactical knowledge, and complete access to human military capabilities. They'll be able to crush any resistance before it can organize. Morrison helped Sarah move her equipment toward the fighter bay access tunnel. As they worked, the ship continued to shudder under incoming fire. The battle outside was growing more intense, and Morrison could hear the sounds of internal combat echoing through the corridors. Sarah, Morrison said as they reached the access tunnel, I need to ask you something. How do I know you're really human? Sarah stopped moving and turned to face him. For a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then she smiled sadly. You don't, Jake. That's the terrifying thing about this war. The Zephyrians are so advanced that they could create perfect human duplicates if they wanted to. Morrison felt his hand moving toward his sidearm before he consciously decided to do it. But, Sarah continued, there is one thing the Zephyrians can't replicate. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It showed a young girl with Sarah's green eyes smiling at the camera while holding a stuffed animal. My daughter, Emma. She died in the Zephyrian attack on Luna Colony 3 years ago. The Zephyrians can copy memories, emotions, even personality patterns, but they can't replicate the specific kind of pain that comes from losing a child. That's why I'm here, Jake. That's why I'm willing to risk everything to stop them. Morrison looked into Sarah's eyes and saw something that no alien technology could fake. The deep, permanent sorrow of a parent who had lost everything that mattered. He lowered his hand from his weapon. Then let's go save humanity, he said. As they made their way through the access tunnel toward the fighter bay, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap that had been years in the making. But for the first time since this nightmare had begun, he also felt something else. Hope. Because if Sarah Chen could hide her true identity and capabilities so completely, then maybe humanity had more secrets and strengths than the Zephyrians realized. The fighter bay was eerily quiet when they arrived. Most of the pilots and ground crew had been called to emergency stations, leaving only a skeleton crew to maintain the interceptors. Morrison spotted 2 guards near the main launch control station, but something about their posture seemed wrong. Compromised? Morrison whispered. Sarah nodded grimly, checking her scanner. Both of them. We'll have to find another way. Morrison studied the bay layout. The maintenance access tunnels run directly under the launch platforms. If we can reach Interceptor 7 from below, we might be able to bypass the guards entirely. They made their way through the cramped maintenance passages, Sarah's equipment creating a soft humming sound that seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. Morrison found himself thinking about his team members who might still be fighting throughout the ship, not knowing that some of their closest friends were now enemies. When they reached the access panel beneath Interceptor 7, Morrison realized they had another problem. The fighter's systems were completely powered down, and starting them would immediately alert anyone monitoring the bay. How long do you need to install your modifications? Morrison asked. Sarah was already connecting her equipment to the Interceptor's systems. 15 minutes minimum. The perception field generators need to be integrated with the ship's power grid and navigation systems. Morrison checked his chronometer. They'd been away from the command structure for almost an hour. By now, someone would have noticed their absence and started searching. As if summoned by his thoughts, Morrison's comm device crackled with an incoming transmission. This time it was Admiral Harrison's voice, but the mechanical quality was stronger than ever. Commander Morrison, report to the bridge immediately. We have located the saboteur responsible for compromising ship security. Morrison looked at Sarah, who was working frantically on her modifications. Her scanner was showing multiple heat signatures moving through the corridors around the fighter bay. They're closing in, she whispered. Jake, I need more time. Morrison made another impossible decision. Keep working. I'll buy us time. He climbed back up through the access panel and into the fighter bay proper. The two guards were still at their posts, but now Morrison could see the telltale signs of Zephyrian control, the slightly unfocused eyes, the unnaturally perfect posture, the way they moved with mechanical precision. Morrison approached them casually, keeping his hands visible. Gentlemen, Admiral Harrison asked me to check on the status of the ready fighters. The guards turned toward him in perfect synchronization. When they spoke, it was in unison, their voices carrying harmonics that made Morrison's enhanced earpiece whine with interference. Commander Morrison, you will accompany us to the bridge for debriefing. Morrison felt pressure building in his mind as the Zephyrian influence tried to take hold. The earpiece's protection held, but he could sense the alien presence probing for weaknesses in his mental defenses. Of course, Morrison said, playing for time. Just let me complete my inspection. The guards began moving toward him with that same mechanical precision. Morrison realized he was out of options. He drew his sidearm and fired 2 quick shots, the stun setting dropping both guards before they could raise an alarm. But the damage was done. The shots had triggered automatic security protocols, and alarms began blaring throughout the fighter bay. Morrison could hear boots pounding in the corridors as security teams converged on their position. Sarah, Morrison called down through the access panel. We're out of time. 30 more seconds, came her muffled reply. Morrison positioned himself between the access panel and the bay entrances, knowing that he was about to face overwhelming odds. The first wave of security personnel appeared at the main entrance, and Morrison's heart sank when he recognized several faces from his own team. Sergeant Torres led the group, his sniper rifle trained on Morrison with mechanical precision. Behind him were Martinez, Jackson, and 3 other operators that Morrison had served with for years. Commander, Torres said, his voice carrying that same alien harmonic. You will surrender your weapons and submit to neural adjustment. Morrison kept his sidearm ready but couldn't bring himself to fire on his own people. Torres, fight it. You're being controlled. There is no control, Torres replied. There is only optimization. The Zephyrian Collective offers humanity a more efficient existence. Efficient. Morrison felt anger building in his chest. You mean slavery? Semantics are irrelevant, Torres said, and Morrison realized with horror that his friend was completely gone. Whatever the Zephyrians had done to him had erased the man Morrison had known. Behind Morrison, Sarah's voice echoed up from the access panel. Jake, the modifications are complete, but I need you down here now. Morrison faced an impossible choice. He could surrender and hope that the cognitive virus could eventually free his team, or he could fight his way out, possibly killing people he'd sworn to protect. The decision was made for him when Torres pulled the trigger. Morrison dove aside as the sniper round shattered the deck plating where he'd been standing. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to return fire while rolling, his stun rounds dropping 2 of the compromised team members. But more security personnel were pouring into the bay, and Morrison realized that staying to fight would only result in his capture or death. He dropped through the access panel just as Sarah was powering up the interceptor's engines. The fighter's systems came online with a soft hum, and Morrison could see the perception field generators creating a subtle distortion in the air around them. "Will this actually work?" Morrison asked as he strapped himself into the gunner's position. Sarah was already beginning the launch sequence. "We're about to find out. Jake, once we're out there, everything depends on reaching that command ship. If we fail, humanity loses its last chance." The interceptor lifted off from the launch platform and accelerated toward the bay exit. Through the canopy, Morrison could see the chaos of the space battle around them. Human ships continued to fire on each other, while the Zephyrian vessels waited like predators watching their prey destroy itself. As they emerged from the fighter bay, Morrison realized that they were now completely on their own, flying toward an enemy that had already demonstrated its ability to turn humanity's greatest strengths against itself. The fate of every human in the galaxy now rested in the hands of a SEAL, commander and a mysterious agent who had spent days pretending to clean weapons while planning the most important mission in human history. The perception field worked, better than Morrison had dared hope. Their interceptor slipped through the chaotic battle like a ghost, invisible to both human and Zephyrian sensors. Around them, the space battle raged with desperate intensity as compromised human ships systematically destroyed their former allies. "My God," Morrison whispered, watching a destroyer he'd served on 2 years ago fire its main batteries into a cruiser's engine compartment. "How many people are we losing?" Sarah's voice was grim as she monitored the tactical feeds. "Approximately 60% of the fleet is now under Zephyrian control. The remaining ships are either fighting back or trying to retreat, but they're outnumbered and outgunned." Morrison studied the Zephyrian command ship growing larger in their viewport. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of any human vessel, with organic curves that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. Strange energy patterns danced across its hull, and Morrison could swear he heard a low humming that seemed to resonate in his bones. "Sarah, what exactly are we flying into?" "According to our intelligence, the command ship is essentially a living organism. The Zephyrians don't build technology the way humans do. They grow it. That ship is part machine, part biological entity, and part something else entirely." Morrison felt his enhanced earpiece pulse with increasing intensity as they approached the enemy vessel. Through its protection, he could sense something vast and alien trying to probe his mind. It felt like standing at the edge of an ocean of consciousness that was both beautiful and terrifying. "I can feel it," Morrison said. "It's trying to get inside my head." "The closer we get, the stronger their psychic influence becomes," Sarah explained, adjusting their approach vector. "The command ship is essentially the brain of their fleet network. Every compromised human, every controlled ship, every strategic decision flows through that vessel. Their interceptor passed through the outer defensive perimeter without triggering any alarms. The perception field made them appear as nothing more than space debris, but Morrison knew that wouldn't last once they were inside the ship. "There," Sarah pointed to what looked like a natural opening in the ship's hull. "Docking bay. But Jake, once we're inside, the perception field won't help us. We'll be on our own." Morrison checked his weapons and equipment one final time. Along with the cognitive virus device, he carried specialized ammunition designed to disrupt Zephyrian technology. Sarah had armed herself with weapons that seemed to blend human engineering with something more advanced. "Agent Chen," Morrison said as they approached the docking bay, "there's something I need to know. What happens to you after this mission?" Sarah was quiet for a moment as she maneuvered their ship through the alien docking sequence. "That depends on whether we succeed. If the cognitive virus works, I'll probably be reassigned to help clean up the aftermath. If it doesn't work, none of us will be around to worry about it," Morrison finished. The interior of the Zephyrian ship was unlike anything Morrison had ever seen. The corridors seemed to be grown rather than built, with walls that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The air was thick with humidity and carried scents that were both exotic and somehow familiar. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, consulting a scanner that showed the ship's internal layout. The central processing core is 17 levels down at the heart of the vessel. They moved through passages that seemed to respond to their presence, The walls shifted slightly as they passed, and Morrison had the unsettling feeling that the ship itself was aware of their intrusion. Motion sensors? Morrison asked. Worse, Sarah replied. The ship is conscious. It knows we're here, but it's curious about us. That's buying us time, but it won't last long. They encountered their first Zephyrian guards at the entrance to the central elevator system. The aliens were tall and graceful, with an otherworldly beauty that was almost hypnotic. When they moved, it was with a fluid precision that made human motion seem clumsy by comparison. But they were also completely unprepared for human tactics. Morrison and Sarah attacked simultaneously, using weapons and strategies that the Zephyrians had never encountered. The aliens' psychic abilities, so effective against human minds, provided no defense against the cognitive virus-enhanced reflexes and tactical awareness that Morrison and Sarah possessed. The elevator descent took them through levels that defied human understanding of architecture. Some sections seemed to exist in more dimensions than the standard 3, while others contained what appeared to be miniature ecosystems complete with weather patterns and indigenous life forms. The Zephyrians don't just build ships, Sarah explained as they watched artificial aurora dance across the ceiling of one level. They create mobile worlds. This vessel probably houses several million beings. Morrison tried to process the implications. If this ship is destroyed, we'd be committing genocide. That's why the cognitive virus is so important, Sarah said. It doesn't destroy, it liberates. Every being on this ship, human or Zephyrian, will be freed from the collective control system. They reached the central processing core to find it defended by something Morrison hadn't expected. Humans. A dozen men and women in fleet uniforms stood guard around a massive organic structure that pulsed with the same rhythms Morrison had been hearing since they boarded the ship. Among the guards, Morrison recognized Admiral Harrison. Commander Morrison, the ADME. The cognitive virus spread through the Zephyrian neural network like wildfire. Morrison watched in amazement as the organic walls around them began to change color, shifting from the pulsing bioluminescence to something that looked almost human. The ship itself was being liberated. The vessel is reverting to its original programming, Sarah explained, monitoring the transformation on her scanner. Before the Zephyrians corrupted it, this was actually a peaceful exploration ship from a species called the Ethera. They were enslaved centuries ago. Morrison helped Admiral Harrison to his feet. The Admiral's eyes were completely clear now, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority and warmth that Morrison remembered. Commander, Agent Chen, Harrison said, I owe you both an apology and an explanation. I've been fighting the Zephyrian influence for weeks, trying to maintain enough control to warn anyone about what was happening. Sir, how much do you remember? Morrison asked. Everything, Harrison replied grimly. The Zephyrians have been planning this operation for 2 years. They've infiltrated not just our military, but our research institutions, our government, even our civilian infrastructure. What we've stopped here is just the beginning. Sarah was downloading massive amounts of data from the now liberated ship's systems. Jake, you need to see this. The Zephyrians weren't just planning to enslave humanity. They were planning to use us as weapons against other species. Morrison studied the tactical displays that Sarah was projecting. The scope of the Zephyrian Empire was staggering. Thousands of enslaved worlds, millions of conquered species, all serving a collective consciousness that treated individual minds as nothing more than components in a vast machine. But here's the important part, Sarah continued. Humanity has something that no other species they've encountered has possessed. Our ability to resist psychic control, to maintain individual consciousness even under extreme pressure, to adapt and improvise in impossible situations. Admiral Harrison nodded. That's why they wanted to study us rather than simply destroy us. They've never encountered a species that could develop countermeasures to their control systems. Around them, the ship continued to transform. The organic corridors were becoming more geometric, more familiar. Morrison realized that the vessel was adapting itself to human needs, creating an environment where they could function effectively. Agent Chen, Morrison said, what exactly is your exit strategy? Sarah's smile was brilliant. We're not leaving, Jake. We're taking this ship home. Morrison stared at her. What do you mean? This vessel contains the complete Zephyrian tactical database, their technological specifications, and the locations of every enslaved world in their empire. More importantly, It now has an Ethera crew that has been waiting centuries for the chance to fight back. As if summoned by her words, beings began emerging from deeper within the ship. They were tall and ethereal, with an otherworldly beauty that reminded Morrison of the Zephyrians but without the cold perfection of the collective consciousness. Their eyes held warmth, intelligence, and something that Morrison recognized as hope. One of the Ethera approached them, its voice carrying musical tones that somehow translated directly into Morrison's mind. "We thank you, humans, for freeing us from the endless night. For 700 years we have dreamed of this moment." Admiral Harrison stepped forward. "We're honored to meet you. I'm Admiral Harrison of the Human Fleet. This is Commander Morrison and Agent Chen." The Ethera being studied them with obvious fascination. "You are the first species to successfully resist Zephyrian assimilation. Your minds are unique, chaotic in a way that creates strength rather than weakness." Sarah was still downloading data, but Morrison could see her monitoring the space battle outside. "Jake, the situation in the fleet is stabilizing. The cognitive virus is spreading to the other Zephyrian ships through their communication networks. The controlled humans are being freed." Morrison watched through the ship's organic viewports as the space battle transformed. Human vessels that had been firing on each other moments before were now turning their weapons against the remaining Zephyrian ships. The tide of battle was shifting dramatically. But Morrison knew that this victory, as significant as it was only the beginning. "Agent Chen," he said, "when we get back to Earth, there are going to be some very difficult questions about human intelligence division, about how long you've known about the Zephyrian threat, and about what other secrets are being kept from regular military personnel." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I know, and I'm ready to answer those questions. But Jake, there's something else you need to understand. This mission didn't just free the humans under Zephyrian control. It created an alliance that could change the balance of power in this galaxy." The Ethera being spoke again, its voice carrying undertones of determination. "The Zephyrians have enslaved 237 species across 47 star systems. With human tactical innovation and Ethera technology, we can begin the liberation of all enslaved worlds." Morrison felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. "You're talking about a war that could span decades." "We're talking about a war that's already been going on for centuries," Admiral Harrison said. "The difference is that now we have a chance to win it." Sarah finished her data download and turned to face the group. "The intelligence we've gathered here will revolutionize human understanding of galactic politics, alien technology, and our own capabilities. But more importantly, it will help us prepare for what's coming next." "What do you mean?" Morrison asked. "The Zephyrian collective extends far beyond this sector," Sarah explained. "When they realize what's happened here, they'll send reinforcements. Massive fleets that will make today's battle look like a skirmish." Morrison looked around at the liberated ship, at the Ethera crew who had endured centuries of enslavement, at Admiral Harrison who had fought to maintain his humanity under impossible circumstances, and at Sarah Chen, the mysterious agent who had orchestrated the most important victory in human history while pretending to clean rifles. "Then we'd better get ready," Morrison said. The Ethera ship, now under Allied control, began its journey back toward human space. But Morrison knew that they weren't just returning home with intelligence and new allies. They were returning with the knowledge that humanity had a role to play in a conflict that spanned the galaxy. As they traveled through space, Morrison found himself thinking about Sarah's original cover identity. She had been just a maintenance worker, cleaning weapons and staying invisible. But sometimes, he realized, the most important battles were fought by people who others never noticed, who did the quiet work that made victory possible. 3 months later, Morrison stood in the maintenance bay of the new UES Liberation, watching Sarah train a new generation of human intelligence operatives. She was teaching them the art of hiding in plain sight, of gathering intelligence while appearing to perform routine tasks, of being ready for anything while looking like nothing special. The war against the Zephyrian Empire had indeed begun in earnest. Human and Ethera forces were liberating enslaved worlds across the galaxy, using tactics that combined human innovation with alien technology. It was a conflict that would define the future of galactic civilization. But Morrison had learned something important during those desperate hours aboard the alien command ship. Sometimes the fate of entire civilizations rested in the hands of people who others dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon in the galaxy was a person who could clean a Barrett .50 caliber rifle while planning to save the universe. As he watched Sarah work, Morrison smiled. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its military might. It was its ability to produce people like Sarah Chen, individuals who could be exactly what the situation required when it was needed most. The galaxy would never be the same.